Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, the war in Yemen at another crossroads.
In Yemen, long simmering tensions between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have burst into the open.
How Yemenis got caught up in a conflict between two great powers in the region, and where they go from here. I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode, and importantly, what you'd like to see us do next. Or if you're on your podcast app, leave us a review telling us where you're listening from, and please give us a 5-star rating while you're at it. It does help the show.
My name is Abubakr al-Shamahi. I'm an editor with al-Jazeera.com, and I'm based in North Carolina. Born and raised in the UK, but my family are originally from Yemen, so I followed Yemen closely over my career, as well as the wider region. And that's why this topic is so interesting, because it doesn't just encompass Yemen, it encompasses the wider region, it encompasses Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and will possibly have an impact on other countries as well.
So, Abubakr, welcome to The Take. It's really great to have you on, because there's been so much news lately about Yemen, and also so much news happening in the region that's indirectly tied to Yemen. So it'll be really nice to drill down with you. And I would say that the basic frame of our discussion today is this. The sort of shorthand is that pre-2017, Yemen had been split into two competing factions. And then it became three main competing factions after 2017. And then earlier this month, suddenly and quite dramatically, it went back to two. So set the scene for us as it stands right now. Who controls what in Yemen?
So the Houthis, who are the rebel movement who basically took control of the Yemeni capital Sana'a in 2014, they still control northwestern Yemen. The capital Sana'a is still in their hands. But what's changed is in the other portions of Yemen, so the southern and eastern portions. Primarily, we're talking about the Southern Transitional Council and the internationally recognized Yemeni government. The Southern Transitional Council, whilst they're on the side of the Yemeni government in that they were against the Houthis, they wanted the secession of South Yemen. They wanted to split and become their own country as they were prior to 1990. What's happened in the last few weeks is that at the start, and we're talking early December, late November, they really were solidifying all of those areas that used to be part of South Yemen under their control. But then they went too far. And then they crossed a red line for Saudi Arabia.
Black plumes of smoke over the port of Mukalla in southern Yemen. The strike by a Saudi-led coalition was aimed at what Riyadh said was a weapons shipment from the United Arab Emirates to a Yemeni separatist group.
Right. So you have the Houthis, you have the Yemeni government. That's another word for the PLC, the Presidential Leadership Council, the Saudi-backed group. But up until a few weeks ago, there was this third group, and this is the UAE-backed Southern Transition Council, the STC. And it was a major player. And then the Saudis, as you said, decided to step in, and they did. So what was it that the Southern Transitional Council, the STC, did that crossed that red line for Saudi Arabia?
That's where it's interesting, because the STC over past few years have, spread into areas that were under the control of the Yemeni government, which again is backed by Saudi Arabia. And yet all those things weren't red lines. And the feeling is that because the STC are backed by the UAE as well, that there was an understanding between the Saudis and then the Emiratis. But with the announcement that the STC had captured the whole of Hadramaut, that pushed right onto the Saudi border. And for the Saudis, that's where the red line was. It was, we can't have this force that we don't really trust right up on our borders. That's where it becomes a question of, okay, the UAE, we have this tacit understanding with you, but you've gone against that understanding. So what exactly is going on here? And now it's not just a question of, can we trust the STC, but it's also a question of, can we trust the UAE as well?
So Saudi Arabia's response, I think, surprised many people. Direct military action. It was swift. It was definitive. Walk me through the Saudi strategy and maybe why it caught Abu Dhabi so off guard.
Essentially what they did is they attacked a shipment coming in from the UAE, from a UAE port that was being delivered to the STC in the Yemeni port of Mukalla in Hadramaut. And the Saudis said it contained military hardware and equipment for the STC. It caught everyone off guard because it's very unusual to see this kind of direct confrontation between two Gulf allies and two countries that have been very close over the years. Perhaps if people have been paying attention, not as close over recent years, but still the kind of the language being used in terms of the relations between the two countries, the language of brotherly cooperation, of partnership. We are allies, we are partners. And then the Saudis do this attack. And I think for the Saudis, it was a message to the Emiratis and to the SCC of basically, this has gone too far. Initially, the Saudis had been talking about negotiations. They'd been trying to get the SDC to agree to a new deal, as they have done in the past. And the SDC were just refusing to listen. And I think for the Saudis, they felt that this is not just the SDC refusing to listen. This is the UAE refusing to listen, because the SDC wouldn't have been acting in the way it had if it wasn't for the UAE backing them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it is unusual for direct military confrontation against a GCC member, but it's also unusual to have these two competing separate groups, both opposing the Houthis. I couldn't believe that would just exist for so long without those two coming to some sort of accommodation, because they have the same goal.
They have one goal that they share, which is to defeat the Houthis. Yeah, but the SDC and the Yemeni government were coming from two fundamentally opposed positions. The Yemeni government has always said that the unity of Yemen is a red line. For the Southern Transitional Council, Yemeni secession was their red line. South Yemeni secession was their red line. They were not willing to accept a future, and they are still, many of them, not willing to accept a future where they remain part of a united Yemen. They see that as a failed project, as something that they will not go back to, as something that they fought in their narrative with their blood to stop and to create this de facto South Yemen that had existed. And yes, you have this opposition to the Houthis, but this isn't just come out of nowhere right now in terms of the most recent conflict. There have been conflicts going on between the two forces for a number of years. You're looking at 2019, 2020, and there's direct military confrontation between the Yemeni government and the SDC. Yeah. So yeah, there's been a lot of kind of unrest that has been happening. There's been a lot of violence that has happened. It had calmed down, but I think that kind of again, fundamental divide has always remained and just hasn't gone away.
Wow. Okay, I'm thinking about it differently. Okay, so the UAE, is it fair to say that they abandoned the SDC?
I don't think that the UAE is just going to wash its hands of Yemen. This is a country where the UAE has built up influence over the last decade. The UAE has previously said that it was withdrawing from Yemen towards kind of the late 2010s, where there was a lot of pressure from the West, and particularly from the US, against the Saudi-led coalition's involvement in the war in Yemen because of the humanitarian situation. And the UAE at the time kind of said, you know what, well, we're done with this. We're not going to be involved. And yes, they withdrew the majority of their forces, but they retained some forces on the ground. This time, they're basically now saying, no, we've withdrawn all our forces, including from very strategic locations on the kind of Yemeni coastline. But again, I have a feeling like the UAE is not just simply going to let go of all the hard work that it's put in over the years, because these are very strategic locations. I think this fits into a wider UAE strategy of kind of being part of the Red Sea.
More with Abubakr after this break. So, Abubakr, we were just talking about how tensions between the UAE and Saudi have played out within the war in Yemen. I want to turn to something else that we've seen recently in the headlines, and these are these stories of the UAE allegedly running secret prisons in Yemen and really disturbing claims of abuse. Why is all of this coming out now? What can you tell us about those claims?
These secret prisons have been reported on for a number of years now. There have been documentaries made. Human rights activists have been speaking about these secret prisons that were allegedly controlled by the UAE in southern Yemen. And I think why we're now seeing this, new access to these alleged prisons, but also the Saudi reporting on it and the heavy Saudi reporting on it in the Saudi media is because it's now fair game. So whereas before the Saudis would have been unwilling to directly criticize an ally like the UAE and to really shed too much light on it, I think now this is part of the wider media narrative and the wider media war, which is right now kind of almost like the real war that's going on between the two sides, and particularly from the Saudi side toward the Emiratis in their media.
Yeah, the gloves are off in the Saudi media. It's been remarkable.
Exactly. It's now fair game. And these prisons are part of that. And look, if the prisoners who've, again, allegedly been held in these prisons are released, then I think shedding the light is only a good thing, because there are a lot of stories of people being held in really harrowing conditions. And the hope will be that they'll be able to see the light of day.
Okay. The UAE's Ministry of Defense issued a statement categorically denying the accusations, describing them as false and misleading allegations and claims that are not based on evidence or fact. These allegations are attempts to mislead the public opinion and defame the armed forces of the United Arab Emirates, the statement read. That's according to Al Jazeera English. So you want to get that in there. So zooming out a bit, I wonder if Yemen can be a useful metaphor to explain this larger Saudi-UAE split. And there's a lot to draw from. I'm going to put you on the spot. I mean, approach to power, diplomacy, regional stability. What can we learn from this conflict that helps explain these two regional powers and their approach to the world?
Firstly, it's interesting that what's happened in the last few weeks has brought into the open this divide that had long been spoken of over the last few years, that, the whispers were the Saudis, the Emiratis, the analysis was, they may not be on the same page on a lot of these things. And because Saudi Arabia and the UAE, because of the way the two countries work, because of the way their two ruling systems work, it's often very hard to get a lot of this information out in the open. It's not like there are a lot of on the record conversations happening between officials and journalists that would expose those kind of tensions, especially between two allies. Yemen has kind of brought that out into the open. And now then we need to think about, okay, so why is Yemen such a divide? I think the UAE's alliance with Israel over the last few years, on the UAE's side, they can perhaps look at Israel and look at its actions and still see a country that they can deal with to a degree. But for Saudi Arabia on their side, I think the Saudis see themselves as a first-rate power in the region.
Yes.
They do not see that there's a future where Israel, acting the way it currently does, can be a regional hegemon whilst Saudi Arabia is still able to flex its muscles and to project their power across the region.
No, it's really interesting. So there's so much focus on the Saudi-Emirati split. It's really easy to forget about the Houthis, right?
They began in the 90s as a moderate theological movement of the Zaydis, that's a Shia minority group. Fighting corruption was one of their main aims. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq was a turning point. Analysts believe the war transformed the Houthis into a resistance group with deep anti-American sentiments.
They have their own challenges at the moment, especially as the Iranian government, their backer seems to be weakened. There's facing new threats of possible airstrikes from the U.S. or Israel. So what can you tell us about the view from Sana'a at the moment, which is the Houthi-controlled Yemeni capital?
The Houthis are worried. The Houthis are looking at what's happening in the other parts of Yemen. And before, they could kind of look across and just see a divided enemy. They could see this coalition that was supposedly being pitted against them once again fighting amongst themselves. And I think it was just further evidence of the division that was on the other side that has helped the Houthis entrench themselves in power in northwestern Yemen. But things have flipped now, and it's not just that the Yemeni government now say they have control of all these areas. There's now a real push to make a narrative about there being a unified kind of chain of command. The real thing to pay attention to will be whether that is actually followed by action on the ground. The Yemeni government and Saudi Arabia are not saying that they're going to return to war against the Houthis. The war against the Houthis has largely been frozen since 2022. They're not saying that they're going to go back to war immediately, but basically what they're saying is, if the Houthis don't come to negotiations and we can't find an agreement, then we are willing to restart the fight against the Houthis.
So we have been talking a lot about the chessboard, but we want to make it clear the reason we're talking about this is because of its impact on millions of Yemenis inside Yemen and around the world. Their lives are deeply connected to the outcome of whatever happens in this war. And let us remember, people there are still suffering one of the most acute humanitarian crises in the entire world. As we speak, 17 million people face acute food shortages, not to mention blackouts and a lack of jobs, a lack of economic opportunity. I mean, the situation is so dire that the International Rescue Committee has warned that just this month that Yemen will face its worst food crisis since 2022. So with that in mind, considering all that's happened, are the ordinary people of Yemen any closer to seeing an improvement in their day-to-day lives?
I think we're still not there in terms of a conclusion to this war. And ultimately, it won't be until there's an end to the war, that there's stability in the country, that things will improve for the vast majority of people. Some people have done well from this war. Some people, and I'm talking about the elites, the warlords, those who control fighting groups, and some people made money. And then the vast majority of people are poorer than they ever were. And now, because the war has been going on for over a decade, it's become the routine. Almost like for people there, it's become the norm. But like you say, that shouldn't be the case. It's heartbreaking to see, and as someone who, I used to regularly travel to Yemen, and to see the condition the country is in now, to see the condition of, the middle class have become poor, the poor are, just beyond the pale now. It's just hard for me to see an agreement happening without some form of fighting. And that kind of, is obviously going to be very worrying, because that will naturally lead, at least while that fighting is happening, to an even further downturn in the humanitarian situation. If I were to kind of put my realist hat on, it's hard to see a kind of full final agreement in the current situation, just because the Houthis still think they're strong enough. And the other side now is actually gaining more confidence and thinking they're potentially strong enough to make some kind of move. So you'd need like a major change in perspective from one of those two sides. And yeah, I don't know if I see that happening, unfortunately.